So I don't like to have too much of a formula or too much of a rigid view, but I guess there are some signposts that I do recognize. And I think what is kind of, for me, the foundation that allows me to really open to each moment, gives me the capacity to notice moment to moment what's here and how can I live well right now in these conditions, in response to these people, this experience, this moment, whatever it may be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Lisa Kring. Lisa works in Los Angeles in private clinical practice as a therapist. She is also a senior mindfulness teacher at Insight Los Angeles and as a Ketamine Assisted Psychotherapy integration therapist. She became a certified teacher of the Mindful Self-Compassion course under the guidance of founders Chris Germer and Kristin Neff in 2015. She has been a committed practitioner of mindfulness meditation in the Theravada tradition for over 20 years and is a graduate of the Dedicated Practitioner Program and the Advanced Practitioner Program through Spirit Rock Meditation Center. Lisa is trained in Hakomi Somatic Mindfulness Psychotherapy and is a certified deaf doula. Lisa works as an integration therapist with Mystic Health Integrative Medical Center in Los Angeles and is a graduate of the Psychedelic Assisted Therapy and Research Certification Program through the California Institute for Integral Studies and is trained in Ketamine Assisted Therapy through the Polaris Insight Center. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and recognizes her two young adult children as her deepest teachers in life. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting
Yeah,
me.
yeah, I'm excited to have you here. You have I love your background in mindfulness and meditation and therapy, all great stuff. I love talking with people who explore the mind. I'm very interested in see how you view what living well means.
Mm.
I know I just read that introduction, but I also like for folks to introduce themselves because, we how we introduce ourselves in the moment is a little different than what we do when we put in a bio. So,
I agree with you completely. Yeah. Well, I'm just a human being on this planet like everyone else in this moment, right? And trying to live well, seeing what that's about. Every day is really an opportunity for that for me. And my days, given my background as a therapist, it's so amazing. I'll just say, I feel so grateful that I have a background and facility to be of service in the world today in different areas. I work, as you were saying, work with individuals in private practice, and I focus primarily on really because of my mindfulness background, I really meet people where they are and help them heal through these practices and through Hakomi Somatic Mindful Psychotherapy. I can talk about that more later, perhaps. I mean, my day, I just feel so grateful. Like today, just as an example, this is my day. This morning, I live in Los Angeles. I drove out, and as a mindfulness teacher, I teach a lot of groups through InsightLA, but I also support companies that are on the front lines of suffering, a lot of nonprofits, and I do a lot of staff trainings in mindfulness so that they can bring their best selves to their work. So for this company, Upworthy, amazing company, doing beautiful work, creating goodness in the world. They had their company staff retreat, and so drove out and out in Santa Monica, we sat in a circle by the beach in the sand and cultivated mindfulness and self-compassion so that they can be internally resourced and do the work that they do in the world without empathy fatigue and burnout and all this kind of thing. And then I get to do this podcast with you right now, which, just looking at your face, it gives me such joy to be of service and to join with what you're doing to really invite people to explore what it is to live well. What is that? So, I mean, this resonates with me deeply. And then later today, I work with cancer patients as a death doula, cancer support community out here in Los Angeles. I'll be doing a mindfulness is medicine group. I do a weekly group there. I mean, it's my cup runneth over in terms of the combination of being a therapist, a Buddhist practitioner and mindfulness teacher, as well as a death doula. And it has recently brought me into psychedelic assisted therapy work, which that was not something I expected. That's been somewhat of a synchronistic surprise for me, but I find that I'm really poised in a way to be perfectly trained to do that work. So it's been really a beautiful unfolding most recently. But I guess I just say that it gives me great joy to be of service in the world right now. And I'm sure you agree with me. Conditions right now are challenging, I think, for all of us on different reasons. And so it just is an amazing experience to be of service, to help people regulate, to be more responsive, be their best selves in the world, to not fall into too much reactivity. It just goes on and on. So I feel really blessed to do what I do and to really embody these practices. They go from things that you practice to what you become. And so it's also just an amazing experience just to walk through the world, to move through the world in a way where there's such a feeling of wholesomeness and freedom and happiness and being regulated. It's still painful, but I suffer less, and I feel like I'm of service where I alleviate suffering, personal and profound, in any way that I can. And it feels incredible, truly. So,
Awesome. I
mhm.
love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I love
you
it. Love
do,
it.
right? You understand.
I totally do. I get it. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the good work. Like, I'm from the South and grew up Southern Baptist, so we have this
Mm.
thing with people doing that kind of work, like you're doing God's work. All right, that's
That's so
good stuff.
beautiful. It does feel like that kind of, it feels like God's work, sacred work. It feels sacred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Caring for people, serving people, helping people gain some kind of clarity, some kind of understanding, be it at the end of their life, be it, working in organizations, various institutions, and working with people who are there and helping them gain some kind of insight, and at least giving them some tools to help cultivate the capacity to gain some kind of insight into their experience.
Yeah, and Mike's, and what's so great about it, I think you said something about feeling it. People can feel it right away, and that's what's so beautiful. It is something
Mm-hmm.
that you feel in the present moment. You recognize it's not as hard as you think, and then
Mm-hmm.
people start to trust this more and more in the world. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue into this question I asked him from the very beginning. And I'm sure all these things I'm not, I'm sure, but
Mm.
I suppose that some of these things will come back up as we explore what living well means to you. So what does living well mean to you?
Mm. Well, it's such a beautiful, deep reflection. And I think that I explore it every day and every moment, what that really means. And it changes moment to moment, given the conditions as they change. I think there's some general signposts that I do recognize that help guide me. But I think that, and I saw you nod when I said that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like to have too fixed of a mind of what that might be because it might limit my view in any particular moment. And I find that every moment is so precious and unique that if I stay open, I might recognize what that might be in that moment. And even as I say that to you, I get emotional because it changes. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Oh
That
yeah.
yeah. So I don't like to have too much of a formula or too much of a rigid view, but I guess there are some signposts that I do recognize. And I think what is kind of, for me, the foundation that allows me to really open to each moment, gives me the capacity to notice moment to moment what's here and how can I live well right now in these conditions, in response to these people, this experience, this moment, whatever it may be. What cultivates that capacity. And I think the art, for me, living well is an art form. And I love that because I'm kind of a creative person, and it is this capacity to be present because life is really only taking place. It's a radical thing to say this every time I say this, it feels kind of radical. Life is really only taking place in the present moment. That's it. This is it. This is it. You and me right now, this is it. Isn't that just beautiful? Just to really acknowledge that right now together, you and me, like that. This is it, right? And the capacity to not be caught up or entangled with different conditioned habitual mental patterns that can really hijack our awareness and really kind of take us out of the felt sense of the present moment of what's really right in front of us. I'm sure that you can agree that everybody listening, I'm sure, can recognize moments where you've not been present, that your mind is elsewhere. And it's like a bubble kind of pops and you kind of like, we drive a lot in LA. I don't know if you drive a lot where you are.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we're driving a lot because it's a sprawl, it's spread out, we're driving. But often you can be driving and you'll get to the destination and then you'll kind of go, oh my God, who was driving the car? I don't even know. I was really elsewhere in my mind. So this capacity to really untangle from this conditioned mind and to really move and to drop down and to come to your senses and to be present is, for me, the real foundation to explore and to inquire in each moment. Okay, how can I live well right now? And living well, for me, it's being present, but it's being present with wholesome intentionality. This is all Buddhism, what we practice, is that we inquire about each moment from a wholesome quality of mind heart, exploring with love and wisdom and compassion. Okay, what would love do in this moment? And so that's really, I think, the most important aspect for me. And I will say, I'm happy to let you know, it has worked out pretty well.
Nice. Yeah, I can imagine.
I love your smile. Because I
Thank
can
you.
tell when I say it, what's so beautiful to watch you, because I'm watching you. It's great that we can see each other on this podcast. I can
Yeah.
see I can see that you understand.
I'm feeling you. I'm feeling it.
And that's it, but that's it. That's it. That's really it. And that maybe perhaps we're not so separate, and that this collective knowing is something that we can all understand together. And connecting, to me, I would say being present and connecting in a wholesome way is what is living well is about in the present moment, and like connecting with you right now and feeling it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you said quite a few things that I think they're so important. I think, yeah, you see me smiling because it resonates with me. I
I
see the
know, but I
value in
love
it.
that.
And the very first thing you said too, that it changes. I think that's so important to recognize that we're having this conversation. That's the big point of having this conversation. And the conversations I'm having on this podcast is that there are different takes, there are different perspectives. Those perspectives shift and change throughout our lives, and I love throughout each moment. Each moment, I don't know exactly uh, how I'm going to view living well in that particular moment under the current circumstances that I find myself in. And I like it. I thought hopefully we'll unpack a little bit more of those signposts. There are some signposts. There are some general things that we can
Hmm.
point to. Nonetheless, how do I know how I see what living well is based on the conditions of my present situation, what's happening right now. I think that's so awesome, and your emphasis on presence, being present, being in the moment, listening to what is happening right now. Because if I want to know what living well means, I have to listen. I have to tune in to what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't tune in to what's actually happening, I'm not going to be able to engage in skillful means, a skillful way to bring about that love that you're saying about um, listening deeply, being really present. And then how do I take that, what I gather from that presence? I love how you said that. Yeah, I don't know your exact words, but how I can love from that space, how I can love from that moment, from that reflection in the present
Yeah.
moment.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I often keep it so simple because I don't like to overthink things because, like you were saying, being receptive, like this, letting it in, letting this moment in fully. That's
mhm.
not so easy sometimes, right?
Oh,
No, no, there's a lot, the conditioned mind, there's a lot that resists or might. So letting it in, this is the way it is right now. And what would love do in this moment? And, it's going to change. That's, in Buddhism, we don't want to keep rigid views. And, because
mhm.
otherwise I'll miss it. I'll miss this moment with you right now.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that one of I know in the yoga tradition we call them kleshas.
Yes.
And those
In
kleshas, I know in the
Buddhism,
Buddhists they call them,
also. Yes.
yeah, oh, they call them kleshas there too. And,
Yeah,
like that was the craving or fixation. When we become fixated on anything, and that's fixated on a view. If you get fixated on a view, that to me that means that we're not learning, we're not taking in our experience, because every experience is an opportunity to gain further insight. Because and I love that in the Buddhist tradition it's really explicit about impermanence and constant change.
I
If we're
know.
living in a world of impermanence and there's this constant dependent origination, or things are constantly arising from the interactions of all kinds of different things,
It's
and we're
right.
not modifying our view, something is wrong if we're not modifying our view based on that constant shift and change and interaction and play of different entities coming together in each moment. It requires a capacity to change our perspective. Even we may have a general theme, a
Mm,
common theme. I do think that is important. For me, that common a principle for me is love. That's just the
mm,
word I use. That's my common principle. Nonetheless, how I see that and how I express that love is going to evolve. It's going to change based on the experience of being a human being in a world that is constantly fluctuating and moving around. Yeah, I
yeah,
love it.
it really changes. And I think what's really interesting about, having a meditation practice or a spiritual practice, and not to say, I also don't want to have the view that one has a better view than,
I
it
know.
is really about my mind. I think you said something, it's keeping my mind open
Hmm.
and not, how easily the mind loves to have a view. It loves it. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And just noticing, and like even right now as we're talking, what feels really good to me, and I recognize it as a felt sense in my mind, is when the mind just stays open and receptive. This feels very, very wholesome to me.
Hmm.
It feels very healthy, and I feel more connected to everything. I think there's something about it, just is better to be connected than disconnected to what is in the moment. And if my mind has a lot of views, it separates it, it creates filters,
Hmm.
and it gets in the way, and I suffer more. And
Yeah.
so that clearing of that mind, but it takes practice, doesn't it?
Right? A lot of practice.
But it feels so good.
Right?
And
Yeah.
there'll be situations, it's so interesting in what love will do moment to moment. There'll be situations where there will be people there where love will say, or what love will do is to really not engage in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
there'll be other moments when to engage is what feels like what love would do. Sometimes you can love in a way and have presence without having to necessarily say anything or do anything. So it's so subtle. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be feeling into it to know.
Yeah.
That
That's
don't know
deep.
mine. I know. It's
Yeah.
deep.
That's deep what you're
It's
saying.
so deep.
I
I
love it.
love it.
Because 100%, because that's not, we're not, I'm glad you're saying too that it's not easy. It's not easy, folks. We're not saying that it's easy, and we're not saying that it's impossible either. It requires practices, requires cultivating the habits of mind that are
Yes.
conducive to being able to do that. And I think, and that's something for all of us. For I feel, in my personal perspective, is that we're going to be doing that to the day we leave this earth. We can
Yeah.
constantly be refining our capacity to do that. This is, the thing I like about a lot of Buddhist teachers, a lot of teachers who teach meditation, who are older, who've been doing it a long, long time. Like
Yeah.
the Dalai Lama, I love the Dalai Lama's. He has all the attention. He's been around a long time, but there's a certain level of humility. There's this certain, I am constantly learning. I am shifting my view based on the shifting dynamics of the world that I am experiencing.
Oh,
And I'm constantly practicing. So what does the Dalai Lama? He's been practicing since he's a kid. He still practices hours a day. So even if a meditation master, continues to practice, and that's his job, is being not just a meditation master, but a spiritual teacher, or and a spiritual guide, and he's continuously practicing. I think that's a big lesson for all of us, that it's an ongoing journey of unfolding awareness and sensitivity that can lead to being more skillful in how we love out of the moments of our experience. Um,
I love that you named humility. I find that to be a really profound spiritual quality.
mm-hmm,
It also, there's something, tell me if you agree with me.
mm-hmm,
There's something about humility in somebody, in genuine, not that allows for safety and non harming,
mm-hmm,
and it's really a profound quality. And for me, I really do kind of, when I sense humility from somebody in that way, it's something I notice. I really notice it.
mm-hmm,
And to me, it's a representation of wisdom and spiritual development.
mm-hmm,
And so I love that you named that.
mm-hmm. I mean, I think you're saying it. I love how we agree on this. You can tell people who practice meditation a lot. You and I think that humility stems from what you said about um, not being fixated on our view. Because if we have humility, we're not going to get stuck on our view.
No.
Because if you think about it, every view, because it's in the relative realm anyway. Every view, because it's a language game that we're playing when we have a view. That view is inherently inhibiting.
Yes.
It's a contraction of some sort.
Yes.
I've taken away openness. I've taken away some
Yeah.
capacity to receive. Now I'm not. We're. It's important. We can't help but to have views, and views are important. You don't throw away all of your views. It's just that being humble enough to recognize that this view that I hold is limited.
Yes.
And if I recognize that that view is limited, some people might think that they're like, oh, well, my view is limited. If it's always limited, then I should just give up. No, it's
No.
actually beautiful, actually, because it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I can keep expanding my view.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's
Think of
something to
the
look
freedom.
forward to.
Think of the
Yeah,
freedom.
exactly. There's freedom in it, right? And the thing is, it's still hard. It's so hard to be humble, to be genuinely humble, to have that kind of humility. There's something about our minds that and the various cultures that we live in, particularly this culture,
Or yeah.
that is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
it's in our conditioning that makes it challenging to have that level of humility and being willing and open to novelty in the way that I am seeing something. I see it in myself. I'm like, wow,
Oh yeah.
it's this is difficult. But that, like you said in the beginning, that sitting and that practice, that thing that we get from meditating or mindfulness practices is being that witness, stepping away and being like, okay, I am not that which has the view.
There you
I
go.
am that which is viewing that which has the view.
I'm getting chills
I
now.
know, me too. And it's that's so
Yeah.
beautiful, and I think that's so profound. Again, audience, we're not saying this is easy. This
It's worth
requires
it.
practice.
It's
It's
worth it.
worth it.
It
That's
pays
it.
off.
Yeah, it's worth the practice. It's worth it. And every time we practice, we get better at it.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is beautiful because we do learn to watch the mind and what it does with a lot of love, with a lot of wisdom. We watch
Mm-hmm.
it, and it does like to hold on to views, to be attached to views, to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it
Yeah.
creates hierarchies and all the stuff. But then it's what you can see if you stay with it and you watch it. You can see how limiting and what it's and how it gets in the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I notice it in my mind, but I think what happens, what's great, is there's enough awareness. There's more awareness than views,
Mm-hmm.
and that holds it in check a little bit. And then I can drop it again. And then, like
Mm-hmm.
you say, then I can really listen
Yeah.
and really open to what this is right now. You know, there is the Eightfold Path in Buddhism, and you know, the first step of the Eightfold Path is wise view, and it's a paradox. It's a paradox
Right.
because it is that you know there is no, you know, the mind, we're letting go of all of that, and it
Mm-hmm.
opens up the whole path. It opens, you know, we're opening, we're receiving, we're actually seeing and feeling and waking up. We're waking up from the conditioned mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see really the tragedy of views in the world today. I mean, we don't need to go into any detail,
No, I know.
but how quickly that gets so calcified, and everybody's just like doing
I
this,
know.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way around it. And so it's a profound thing, but it is beautiful, and it allows for a lot of peace, and it allows for a lot of potential, and it allows for a lot of freedom. And I can tell you know what it feels like in that moment when we drop it. All things are possible.
Right.
Beautiful things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you say something more about that those things, that peace, the
Hmm.
that slipped in mind. I got so excited the last thing you said that I forgot the other two things. You said peace and the two other things that um
The,
that you
the,
get
the
from this.
freedom, the
That the
freedom and
freedom, yeah.
the freedom and the peace. And I would also say um, deep connection and a feeling of contentment, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on those?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, even right now, as we're podcasting,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm feeling, and you tell me if you agree. I mean, let's just go right where we are.
Right.
I feel such a beautiful flow between us right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel the flow?
Yes.
I don't have anything prepared of what I'm going to say.
Mm-mm, me
I
either.
had no idea. So this flow is what feels free to me, like that we can really be in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels very free to me. I feel so trusting of it. And I don't know, like right now, my body feels really peaceful
Mm-hmm.
being in this flow with you. And
Yeah.
also hoping that others, as they listen, I invite them to tune into their own bodies and to feel their mind being freed, perhaps by what's said, the peace. You know, it's something that we feel. It's not an abstraction. We're
Mm-hmm.
really letting ourselves know these states, these qualities. But do you feel it too?
Yeah.
Do you feel peace?
Absolutely.
Where do you feel
Yeah.
peace in your body?
just relax. I'm sitting here in my heart, my chest, and
I
no,
feel it in I feel it in here. I'm
exactly me
feeling the
too.
peace in here. And then there's this contentment because the more you nod, the more we kind of join in this connection and this understanding. And
Mm-hmm.
we're letting go of views though.
Yeah.
We're just trusting our connection right now in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the experience. I mean, I don't know. You tell me how it feels for you. I would love to
Mm-hmm.
know because, and even as people are listening, I would really invite people as they're listening to us to stay in their bodies, to feel their experience, and to notice as we talk what they notice in their own bodies, in their own hearts, in their own minds. And that this has really become something that we can share with them. That's what's so beautiful about this.
Yeah. I'm glad that, I love how when I asked you to elaborate, you brought it to the current experience as an example, a real experience of, you started by talking about being in the moment and being present. And we're having this flow experience together. We're resonating. That's the beauty of a conversation, of an exploratory conversation, a
Mm-hmm.
creative conversation about what is possible. And yeah, we can talk about, mindfulness practices, these things in the abstract, but
That's just talking about. Yeah.
yeah, but we're having that moment like I'm present right now. And let me let you know how I feel as I'm being present, as I feel connected to another being, as I feel that tingling sensation that
Yeah.
transcends all of the drama that I was thinking about prior to this, or whatever it may be. How do we connect in that space and allowing that space to arise, and then feel into it? Feel into what that's like. Like, oh, that's what you're talking about. That's what you're pointing to when you're talking about this path to living well or living a good life. Is having those moments. This experience right now is what we aim towards to organize our lives in a way to
Yeah.
enhance the capacity to have these types of experiences. I love
I
it.
would say it gets more and more radical in terms of it being right
Mm-hmm.
now all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that it can be this way all the time, depending on the attitude of your mind, heart, and your capacity to open to what's here. Isn't that beautiful? And this is it. Isn't this
Mm-hmm.
great? This is our life as it's happening. What's a better way to spend it? So yeah, I invite us to feel. And that's what we learn to do is we learn to trust the moment and
Mm-hmm.
our own experience is our deep teacher.
Yeah.
You'll know it when you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I really always tell people, do you feel it? How does it feel for you? Is it feel like you're feeling freer? Is your mind, are these qualities? And what does peace feel like for you? Like I know what it
Mm-hmm.
feels like for me, but I'd love to know what and sometimes just to hear you talk about it, it's almost like it becomes one and shared, and we just
Yes.
continue to allow that to flow even more. It's I almost want to cry. It's so important that we live well right now,
Mm-hmm.
because the life is precious and it doesn't last
Mm-hmm.
forever. But it feels like right now,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't it feel? Don't we feel like we're in the timeless realm a little bit?
Right. Yeah. It feels great.
It
I
feels
know.
kind of timeless. It feels
Mm-hmm.
kind of like there's no limit to it. That's how I kind of can begin to acknowledge and go, okay, yeah, 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 yeah. And the more you feel this, the more you trust it, and the more you let go.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience.
Yeah. And you're saying something that is an important piece of the puzzle. Now, you can do this in isolation by yourself, great. And that's absolutely great. And you're saying something that's awesome, important too, though. In conversation with folks, interacting with another human being, it's almost like we can set aside ourselves for a moment and lock in and be engaged with another person. That's such you mentioned community earlier about that being an important part of the equation for living well. And here's a good example of
Yes.
how beautiful it can be. is when you're interacting with another person, when you're in conversation and dialogue with another person. It's like
Yeah.
we're dancing. When you're
Yeah.
dancing with another person, or you're playing with another person, and that play, that dance can be verbal, it can be working side by side on a project. That is so integral to being a human being,
Yeah.
is that those precious moments of interaction, that spaciousness that is created when we get into that flow like state. That there's a thing I used to say a lot, and that this conversation is reminding me of, is that God is in the space between two people.
Oh,
And that I think that's so beautiful.
I, I
Again, we're not talking about God. Doesn't have to be some anthropomorphic
no,
mythological figure.
I
But
feel
what I mean by that, that the divine is in that. And I think, people, when I first heard this, is years ago when I was a young kid, and I'm
yeah.
like, oh, not young kid, but I'm showing my age, in my 20s. But
Right.
I'm like, if you think about it, that's so profound and rich, because the
Yeah.
divine is in the space between two people, when those two people, or many people, are connected, or
Yeah.
having this resonance, like you're saying, how you're describing it, that spaciousness. Those are only words trying to point to the characteristics of the divine. It's
Yeah.
spacious, it's peace. I feel this warm, I feel this sense of ease. It's like you feel this being held by the divine. And
Yeah.
it takes place in this situation. It's taking place in the space, or it's being created through a resonance that we're having, and through dialogue, through openness, through receptivity, and being with each other. And it's like, oh, I get a sense of what the divine is like
Yeah.
through that experience. I don't know. I'm playing. I'm just
No, no, no,
saying that
no.
for this
So this
moment. I
is
don't know if that
this
makes
is
sense.
this is
Makes
music
sense.
to my ears because I love that you bring this in, the relational field.
Yes, that's it. The
Because,
relation.
well, no, because there is this kind of in our culture, talk about, these different views that get in the way, this individualistic kind of thing. Even meditation, there's this kind of image of sitting by yourself with your eyes closed, right? But
Mm-hmm.
really, we practice to connect to life is the meditation. Right now is the meditation. We're always with other people. We are relational
Mm-hmm.
beings. We're
Yeah.
wired. We're wired this way. We're wired to be divine,
Yeah.
to know that,
Yeah.
to connect in that way. And so I
Mm-hmm.
love that you are bringing that in. In mindfulness and in Buddhism, everything is relational.
Mm-hmm.
There's no separateness. There is just this field that we join with or we separate from or we whatever, who knows. I don't want to put any kind of dualistic view on it or anything like that, but it feels really great when we join into the flow together. And how
Mm-hmm.
beautiful too that in any moment with people, think about the potential riding on the subway or, these moments. I find it to be profound to connect, especially in times when you least expect it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? This is what's
Absolutely.
divine, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're kind of on automatic pilot and you kind of wake up and you go, wait, I'm standing here in this in sometimes this happens to me a lot where I'll be standing in the market in the checkout lane and I wake up and I go, oh my god, this
Mm-hmm.
is beautiful. Look at can I really look at this person in front of me? Look at the person who is checking out my groceries and I really look at them
Mm-hmm.
and there's a moment, it's like it's just this all the time.
Yeah. If we tap into it.
Yeah. And so I love that you brought that in.
Mm-hmm.
And the divine, it's between two people. It's between all, it's kind of the super in, maybe. We sit and
Mm-hmm.
there's this kind of like this understanding when I go on meditation retreat or when I practice, and I go on long meditation retreats to cultivate and to know the mind and to let go and to trust this more and more, right? Um, and, um, but it is about coming back out of retreat and then showing up. How we
Mm-hmm.
show up, how we show up. It's beautiful, right? It's so
Mm-hmm.
freeing.
It's nothing like coming out of a meditation retreat. Ooh, you're like, oh man, this feels so good. It's
Well, it
so
can be
good.
hard. It can be hard and painful because,
Yeah,
it can be. I think though, you work how you meet that though is
yeah.
what makes, there's Ajahn Chah says, there's suffering that leads to more suffering, and then there's suffering that leads to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yes.
is how we are with it. Like even in difficult, like right now, we're in a flow. Like this is
Oh yeah.
beautiful. There's just,
Mm-hmm.
this is great. This is so wholesome. I could do this all day. I'm like
Right.
happy, right?
Me too.
Yeah, I know. But there are times when it doesn't feel so flow with other people, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how we can be with those moments are really profound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and it can change the field though. I don't try to do it purposely, but my presence, or anybody who creates a presence that's really open, really receptive, people can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does provide you are of service in every moment when you can show up.
Yes.
Does
Yes.
does
Yes.
that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's what I mean by, for me, the practice. Did I cut you off? I'm sorry if I did.
No, no,
Okay.
yeah.
That's what I mean by the.
I want to know if you know what I mean by that.
Oh yeah. So that's what I mean by the practice. We practice, we engage in activities, and in life we're gonna have ups and downs. We're gonna have all kinds of stuff happen to us, and old patterns pop up. Um,
Yeah.
but the practice, and I like it. I think about, no matter what tradition you're a part of, whatever exercises you're doing to help cultivate yourself as a person. But it really, where it really matters is where the rubber meets the road. And where the
Uh,
rubber meets the road is how I show up.
that's
How
it.
am I showing up right now?
That is it.
How am I showing up in this experience, in this moment? How do we how we're showing up right now? And then now, how do we take from this experience how we show up in the next hour or so, in the next situation we find ourselves?
That's right.
Hmm. I love it. And another thing too, it's that I think it's an important piece of this is, um, so yeah, how we show up, but also recognizing that, um, that there's sometimes we're not going to always, we're saying it, but we're not going to always be in this space. And I think recognize,
Right.
okay, I'm not always going to be in this space yet. I think what these experiences that we get on through meditations, or this experience that we're having right now, is to remind us that when we're down and out, that this is available because we're
Yes.
experiencing it. We know what it feels like. And if we allow ourselves to be present with this, when we're in a moment of hurt and pain, I can remember, I'm like, I know what it feels like. I
Yeah.
can bring this feeling on board, not to try to mm, replace what I'm feeling in
Right.
that moment, but to bring it on board to help me get through whatever challenge that I'm having in that moment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. To balance, to provide some balance with that suffering
Yes.
so that you can be with it more skillfully, because it's just this right now. That's just that.
Yeah.
Be with it more. And it's called verified trust. It's you bring that,
Yes.
and and showing up with that. What I do is, you're right. You were very wise in saying, like, I'm not trying to fix it, or, it's bringing that quality. And then my experience is, when that quality is present, things start to unfold, and it's right. It
Yeah.
starts to move in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, just because the heart shows up, the mind becomes open again to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
We call it the Dharma, the
Yeah.
truth. And maybe this is more the truth. And it's so important to celebrate it, to know it, and to experience it, and to know the difference. Many people don't know the difference. And
Mm-mm.
that's why, as being a meditation teacher, you give people a little taste of it, And then, okay, you know this, like, don't forget this. This is real. This is real.
Yes.
And right. And this is what we learn to trust. So you kind of nodded and you smiled when I said, when that quality comes on board, it changes the experience, right?
Yes. Exactly. I do this. I've done this workshop where on resilience, and I use this analogy of
Yeah.
cultivating the garden of your mind. And so you focus on different qualities. And so you develop these qualities of mind. I
Mm,
know like Thich Nhat Hanh stuff is so great with this,
yeah.
that you develop these different qualities of mind, tenderness and love and whatever positive qualities. And you're just planting this and nourishing those things in the garden of your mind, because inevitably a storm is going to come.
There you
And
go.
when that storm has come, you have all these qualities available to help you weather that storm.
There
And
you go.
I love how you say it does it. If you've had a prior experience with a similar storm and you didn't have those tools, you didn't have those qualities, and then if you compare to this current experience where you do have those qualities available to you, you can hold that storm, you can hold that challenge in a way that it transforms your experience of that challenge. When I
Completely.
can hold, let's say we're having a loving experience. I think it is love, it's connection. When I feel like, okay, now I know what love feels like, a quality of love
Mm,
feels like. Now I'm having a hard moment.
yeah.
How do I bring that quality through through remembering that quality of love to hold me right now in
Yeah.
this moment of challenge? It
Yeah.
helps. It doesn't take away the challenge, like you said. It what it does is help me work with that challenge, because I'm being held by love, just as an example. I'm being held by love as I undergo this challenge. And I guess from your work with self-compassion, and compassion, that you have that self-compassion. I'm in a moment of suffering, and I'm holding this moment of suffering
That's
with
right.
this. Just to come back to what we're experiencing in this moment, I'm holding this moment of suffering with this loving presence and connectedness and warmth and tenderness that I'm experiencing through this connection.
Yeah.
How do I bring this on board in those moments of challenges?
Yeah.
Um,
I love the garden metaphor, and that it's so beautiful. I like metaphors that are like that because it makes it feel more real, you know?
mhm, mhm,
And we are gardening. We are actively cultivating and growing and really tending to certain qualities. So, and a lot of people come to me and they want to start meditating when they're in crisis, when things are bad. But we want to start gardening way before
yeah.
because like you're saying, when we tend and we garden these qualities, my experience, and it's what you're saying also, in hard times, which inevitably will come, that's part of the human condition. It will
Mhm.
happen. It's
Oh yeah.
going to happen. I have a whole garden to rest in.
Yes.
And guess what? And guess what? Those qualities meet me in those experiences because I've tended, I've really taken out the weeds, I've really taken care of my mind that way, and they're there. They're there for me.
hmm
And like you say, it holds it differently so I can walk through that experience with more skill in a responsive, not a reactive way, and with mastery. There
Yeah.
is, speaking of holding, and you probably know this because I teach mindful self-compassion. Sometimes what can help in a moment, when we're in suffering, it's a hard time or something like that. We're feeling particularly reactive and contracted, right? It's a downward spiral. We know what that feels like, right?
hmm
Is that sometimes what I do to break that spell and it is like a trance state, isn't it?
hmm
I break that spell, and it's so beautiful. And people here listening can try it. You just put your hand anywhere on your body in a gesture of tenderness and literally just bring that quality. Sometimes it cuts through any argument in the mind when we make it real in the body, and the body doesn't differentiate between the tender caring touch of our own hand or someone else. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's great.
So that you can just put your hand there And just for a moment, just let your experience be held that way. And then suddenly you regulate a little, and then you have perspective, your mind. When we're stressed, we don't think with the whole brain. Suddenly we go back into full brain connection. We see it with more perspective, with we see it from a bigger, we can get perspective, and then we navigate the experience with what love would do, what wisdom would do.
Yeah.
And it's different every time, right?
Yes.
We have to show up. And you know what? When you say showing up, here's the thing that I want to say that I think is really profound. We have to show up in the world, but there's something about showing up for ourselves
Yes.
that's probably the deepest
Yes.
practice of all.
Yes, absolutely. I think
I
so.
think there's a lot because of the way we're conditioned in the West and to bypass our own care and there's so I definitely know what that feels like. Just these deeply ingrained patterns of self neglect, self abandonment
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of another, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so showing up for ourselves, according to the Buddha, it's one of the deepest practices because when we really can do that for ourselves in moments of suffering, in the truth of our experience, then only then can we really show up for others without it being any hypocrisy about it or a
Mm-hmm.
transactional agenda or anything like that. It
Yeah.
really is pure and free
Mm-hmm.
because we're resourced. We have shown up in our own heart. And so the heart is free. It can be free for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think some people might I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure I say something about this showing up for ourselves in our Western context, because
Please
sometimes
do.
one may argue that, oh well, we're, in this culture we're selfish. It's all about me, 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 me. I'm like, look deeper. Take a little closer look at that, and what you'll see, a lot of the things that we do in our society that's are really all about me. It's not just about me. It's about how I am perceived by another.
Oh,
That is not self care. It's not about me, really. It's about
mm,
me within the context of
yeah.
how others perceive me
Oh, yeah.
a lot of times, not
Oh,
all the time. And so that selfishness, it's definitely a lot of selfishness in our culture. But it's amazing how selfish we can be, and we fail to do the thing that's going to really free and liberate us. We
yeah.
say we have freedom, but we don't have the freedom that we think we have. We're free to, we've amassed enough stuff to
Uh,
feel as though we're free enough to show another an image of ourselves that's
yeah.
not who we really truly are. And so it's a subtle trick we're playing with ourselves. That's not self care. That's not like,
Yeah.
really being there for ourselves when we're in pain, when we're hurting inside. We're
Mhm.
not being for ourselves. A lot of times we're virtue signaling. We're trying to,
Yeah.
I want to do to escape myself. Either
Mhm.
I'm doing it in service or I'm doing it in terms of my social,
Mhm.
what do you call it, my social clout or my social status,
Yeah.
based on the game that the society, the culture is playing to put people on certain levels within that social structure. And
Yeah.
so we're doing that. We're playing that game, and the game is like, pretend that you're really selfish. Pretend that you have everything, that is all about you.
Mm.
When most people who are doing that, they're doing it not just for themselves, because you wouldn't really do that for yourself. You're doing it to satisfy a game that we're playing, to
Yeah.
represent ourselves in a way that is not who we really truly are, to
Yeah.
buy into this mask that we put on, in
Mhm.
this game of masks that we're all wearing,
Mhm.
competing who has the most beautiful mask, who has the mask that everyone likes the most, competing for that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that when what we're talking about, and I think, especially with self compassion, to be able to be with yourself, it's to say, how can I be with myself without the mask?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not going to do that. That's too painful.
Well, it takes courage to really, for the heart to open. I hear what you're saying. It can be performative, it can be for status, it can be to elevate and to get attention, like a kind of spiritual narcissism or what have you, like that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is different. And I would say that if you're really present in the experience, it feels different and you'll know the
Yes,
difference
exactly.
if it's the real thing or not.
Love it.
And but I'll say this because I think you're pointing to something very profound. It's that the heart, for the heart to open, it takes so much courage and it takes certain conditions for it to be safe to open really truly in the way we're discussing here. We feel safe with each other. I assume
Hmm.
I'm making that assumption. I feel
I
safe
do. I
here.
do.
Yeah. And so it does take certain conditions of wholesome, space and community because it's kind of scary. Sometimes we do open and then we become very vulnerable and people don't understand it or something like that. So
Hmm.
we do need to find community. We do need to find good company. I think it's a big part of it
Hmm.
because it takes
Yeah.
such courage to open in the way we're talking about that's not performative,
Yeah.
that is quite profoundly vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. Yes. And that requires
Mhm.
courage, like you said. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. There's a quote from, I believe it's Anise Nin. Do you know this quote? It's such a beautiful quote. She says, and I think it's kind of the dilemma of this process for it says, and the day came when the risk to remain tight like a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Can you read that again, please?
Yeah, and the day came when the risk to remain tight like a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Hmm.
We do kind of keep it in the bud, our heart, right? This process, because it's sometimes the way we're brought up or anything, so it just shuts us down again and again, right? We do need to find good community, good company, because but then I think it does get to a point where it's too painful. The heart wants to break free. It wants to bloom,
Hmm.
and in the way that we're describing, in the real
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and in that allows for freedom and true wisdom and love and goodness. That it's wholesome.
Yeah. This has been so awesome. We're time is getting near, but we can
Oh
do this for
no, we're
hours.
back in
I
the
know.
timeless realm. Don't
I
tell me.
know. I know. So, because there's one more thing that you touched on. I mean, there's other things that we
Yeah,
could definitely dig
please.
in, but there's another piece that I love that you said too is that living well is like it's art. It's being an artist. The process of living well is like creating art. And
Yeah,
I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. And I think that's life itself. It's all about creativity. Not all about creativity. A lot of it is about creativity.
yeah.
So can you say a little bit more about the art of living well and the role that creativity and plays in all of that?
Yeah, yeah. This is really for me when I frame it, not as this. Sometimes I think when it becomes an art, it becomes a practice of love. Art is for me, it's not work. Do you know what I mean? Or like a should or a striving. Do you feel the
Hmm.
different flavor of that?
Definitely.
The flavor of it being an art, art is love. It's an expression of something that you love. I love life. I do.
Hmm.
I really am a lover of life. I've always been this way. I love life almost too much. I've had to practice just so I can calm down and get wise in the experience.
I know.
I love life, and so life is my medium.
Hmm.
Now, if it's an art, it's an experience of love. Do you know what I mean? Maybe, people that write music or paint,
Hmm.
it's love. It can be at times very difficult, but it's so meaningful. So when it's an art, it's an act of love and deep purpose and meaning. So it's very, for me, onward leading. And I would say, I often say this to people, when you meditate, it's really about your life. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is it. And welcome to your life. Let it be an art. And think about how that can feel. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a dry practice. It's a really juicy practice
Right?
when it becomes an art. And I like to really feel the meaning and the love. And do you resonate with me in terms of my description of that? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's how it feels for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then every day becomes a symphony.
Exactly. Yeah, I think
I
we're,
like to hear the music.
yes. I think we're all artists. I think we're creative artists, even if we recognize it or not. And I think those of us who do contemplative practice of various sorts and some type of mindfulness, some type of self awareness practice,
Sure.
is that you, and if you're attentive to the how you show up in moment to moment, you can see that there's something artistic about who we are. There's something about
Create
yeah,
creative.
yeah. Like a good analogy for this is life is like the theater, and
Mm.
we're all thespians on this, and in the theater we're all actors playing this. What's that form of theater? That improvisational theater thing?
Oh
What do they call it? It's a particular
yeah.
name of it. We're all improv creative
Yeah.
people showing up to each moment in some creative way. And I think a lot of what we're saying is let's take charge of let's own our our artistic capacity. Let's own our capacity to be creative. Because that's what we're doing if we're aware of it or not. So why not own it, take charge of it, and really guide it in a way that is going to facilitate well-being and living well? Why
Yeah.
not? Because we're doing it anyway, you
It's
know?
a gift, and everyone's art of living is going to show up differently, which is the diversity of the
Yes.
gift of how people. It's going to be different. We're all holding up different corners of the universe in
Yes.
that Indra's net of
Yeah.
interconnectivity, and we're all playing our part, right? Like an orchestra, everyone's gonna sing in their way.
Yes. Oh, I love that analogy. Yes. We all have roles. I guess, as we
And
come
there's
to the,
and there's room for everyone. There's no competition.
exactly. And I'm glad that this came up near the end here because we're circling back to that connection that we're all interdependent. We're all
Mhm.
interconnected. I don't care what analogy one use. I love interest net. And we're like all nodes in this net.
Yeah.
And we all have an impact on each other. Why
Yeah.
not celebrate? When we celebrate life and we bring about goodness in our lives, it has an influence on the whole net. How can I encourage that goodness and beauty in the lives of others? And one way to do that is what we just did today.
Yeah.
What we're doing right now is to let's be an exemplar of a good conversation, a loving conversation. It's a compassionate conversation,
Mhm.
a beautiful conversation. I dare say that. I think I think it is beautiful conversation, and for me,
Yeah.
beauty is related to that feeling of presence, that feeling of spaciousness.
Oh, it
Like,
is beautiful.
oh,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful. Like, so we're being an example of that, and those people who are listening can have some kind of experience. It won't be the same experience that we're having, but they can tangentially feel that in a way. And the way I look at the world, because I do think I like the analogy of Indra's net or the interdependency of everything, is that even if folks who do not listen to this conversation, I
Yeah.
think we've done a greater good.
Yeah. Well,
I think we've influenced the net.
that's what InterestNet is, the nodes, and that your presence is really influencing the whole. And
Yes.
I believe that also. It's why I practice, and it
Yep.
feels like practice is service. Yeah.
It is. That's the way I look at it. It's my duty to cultivate my capacity to be a loving being,
Hmm.
not just for myself and my little self, but
Right.
my what I call my big self,
Yeah.
the universal self, that divine, that is beyond Broderick. It has nothing to do with, I don't say nothing to do with Broderick, but it extends beyond this concept, this notion of a self called Broderick.
Yeah.
There is this greater Brahman, and then in the Vedanta tradition or something. There's this greater spirit, oversoul, the divine that we're all are an expression of. And if I am a reflection of that or an expression of that, and if I have some agency, how do I apply that agency, that will, to illuminate, to bring to life that divine that extends beyond Broderick's fallibilities? How do I open up the capacity for the light of the divine to shine through me? This old gospel song, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
how do I develop myself, my capacity to do that? For me, I feel like that's my duty. That's my primary dharma. The secondary aspect of that dharma is my own idiosyncrasies and my interests and all of that kind of stuff. But that primary dharma for me, or duty in the world, is to do whatever I can to
To
illuminate
shine. To
goodness, to
shine.
shine. Yeah.
I
This
feel
has
it.
been great. I feel it in you too. I love it. I love that we have a very similar notions or perspectives on things. And there's so many avenues that we did not explore, but I love what we did explore. This is perfect and great. And
Great. My
I
pleasure.
suggest,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, and I think as this podcast grows, I want to have these kinds of conversations right now. And later on, for additional content or something, have people come back and we can dig into, maybe we can dig into Buddhism. Maybe we can dig into an important thing. I think that's important is psychedelic assisted therapy and the importance and the value of psychedelics. And I think having more of that conversation it can be profound as well. So, I mean, there's many more opportunities for us. I hope that we can talk again offline or in this medium again, and that would be great.
I would say it is to be so. It sounds like
Awesome.
as it should be. Thank you for
Yeah.
your awareness and your practice and this podcast. And may all beings benefit from this, like you're saying. May it be so.
Awesome. That was beautiful right there. But do you have any other? I want to give you this opportunity. Any final words you would like to leave the audience with?
Mm. Well, I would say, it's interesting. Well, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but as a death doula, we often, because life is so precious, we often have, and this comes from Frank Ostastecki. He has these 5 invitations, and they're beautiful practices every day that you can kind of align with. And he says this. He says, "Don't wait." He says, "Welcome everything, push away nothing,"
Hmm.
and he says, "Bring your whole self to the experience."
Beautiful.
So that sounds good, right? May it be
Yes,
so.
beautiful. Maybe so.
I think it's described our experience today. And I hope this inspires other people to also be awake and free in their lives for all the best reasons.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.